Hi, let's talk for a bit about works cited pages. In the previous video, I talked about how in-text documentation really goes hand in hand with the works cited page. When someone's reading your essay and they see some sort of citation after a quote or paraphrase, they're going to be using whatever's in that citation to see what it corresponds with on the works cited page, so that theoretically they could go find that actual source that you used and look to see where that quote or information is located. Like we said, it's a way to protect yourself against plagiarism because you're giving credit to that source. So in the previous video, I had an actual article pulled up. So let's just use that same article as a basis to talk about works cited pages as well. So right now I have the Academic Search Complete database pulled up. Before I had the PDF of that actual article pulled up, but I think that when you're doing your works cited entries, it's probably best to look at this information on the database first rather than just looking at the direct article. So there are multiple ways that you can go about doing your works cited entries. One way to do it is to just know what information you need to include for each different type of source that you're using, and then just plug in that information. So what you'll see below is I've given some information about typically the types of information that you would include when you're citing different types of sources on your works cited page. So what that means is the information that you include when you're citing an article versus citing a book or citing an online video, you're going to include different information depending on what type of source it is, and even where you access that source. So for example, a works cited entry for an article from a database is going to contain different stuff than an article accessed in a newspaper or an article that you found on a web page, right? So again, I would not try to memorize all that stuff. I would either have your book or some sort of website in front of you so you can compare what you're putting on the works cited page with those requirements that should be in that type of entry. You'll see in the Learning Resources tab in Blackboard, I've put an example of how to cite some of the most commonly used sources. So for sure, probably the most common citation you're going to do for a works cited page is how to cite an article from a database. So that one's going to be at the top. But again, like if I just wanted to plug in the correct information, the database that you use should help you out a lot. So for example, a lot of the information that I would include in my works cited entry is already listed right here. I'm going to need the author, I'm going to need the title of the journal that it's from, I'm going to need the year, the volume, all this stuff. And again, you can look down below this video and you'll see some examples of the types of information that you would include in a works cited entry. But I want to show you something here. If you click on this link rather than the PDF, and again, probably some or most of you did this when you were kind of deciding what articles to use for your report essay, because again, these are always nice because they contain an abstract, which should save you some time. But something to think about is that if you go here, on the right, you'll see these tools. And one of the options that you have is that if you click this link here, it will automatically create a citation for this article. And it will do it according to whatever formatting style you have to use. So let me click on this just to show you. If you click on Cite, you'll see a scroll down menu right here. And these are all the different types of citation methods. You've heard me talk about APA before. So if you had to use this article in a class where you had to use APA style, this is the way that it would look. But you just want to scroll down to where it says MLA, since that's what we use for English classes here. Excuse me. So if you look here, this is in the correct format for a works cited entry. So really, you could cut and paste this and put it into your paper. I'm going to add a big however to that though. However, you would need to make some changes before you actually submitted it with the rest of your paper. So I'll talk about that in a second. We'll come back to it. But again, this should save you some time if you just choose the correct style and then cut and paste and then fix this up for your works cited page. So just know that that's a tip that you can use. Excuse me. The other thing is you'll see this link at the bottom that says permalink. You'll notice that really for pretty much whatever type of source, at least if it's an online source, the very last piece of information you'll want to include, and it's included here, for example, is you want to give the URL so that somebody in your audience could actually go to this site and find the article that you used. Really, that's probably the most important piece of information, so they can go find this source. So the problem is that sometimes on databases and various other sites, sometimes these links to articles will disappear, or the article itself will move or disappear. So when you put this URL in your paper, sometimes your author might go to that URL and that article's not there anymore. So something you can do to kind of prevent that sort of situation is if you click this link that says permalink, and then it'll generate right here, again, just like it says, sort of a permanent link to this article. So if for some reason, you know, something gets moved or something like that, that this link should get you to where you need to go. So I would always recommend when you're adding that URL element for your works cited entries, I would just cut and paste this here. You know, just highlight it and then paste it into your paper. So I pulled up, this is the same works cited page sample that I used in the previous video because I want to point out a few things about how your works cited page should look. We're going to talk about this issue, I think, next week, but there's a difference between a bibliography and a works cited page. A works cited page is only going to list sources that you actually quoted or paraphrased in the paper itself. A bibliography would list any article that you even looked at in the process of doing your research, whether you ended up using it in your paper or not. So all we want is a works cited page. So you guys should have just like 3 sources on this works cited page. Whereas, you know, if you were doing a longer research paper, maybe your instructor would ask you to do a bibliography where you'd have to list lots of sources, right? So when you're doing your works cited page, make sure that it's not just tacked on to the bottom of the last page of your essay. So again, a works cited page does not count as one of the pages of your essay. It should be treated as though it's separate. So this should not be at the bottom of page 5 of your report. This should be on a separate page after the essay. That doesn't mean that you should you know, create a separate document or upload it separately on Blackboard. You can keep it all as one document. Just put this works cited page as the last page of your essay, okay? So I don't have it this way here, but just like you would number all your regular pages of your essay, this on your works cited page, it should be numbered as well. So probably it's going to be page 6 of your essay, right? So like normal, you'll include your last name and the page number in the upper right hand corner. So again, like if you've been doing this already, this very last page should have page numbers as well. So a couple things as far as how these works cited entries should look and how they should be listed. First of all, they should be listed alphabetically by author's last name. So what you'll see below, where I further explain what should be included in a works cited entry, you'll see that the very first piece of information that should be listed is the author's name in the format last name, comma, first name, right? So put them in alphabetical order so that a reader could very easily find whatever that source is. Remember, what they're looking for is this the last name of that author, because that's what's in that in-text citation, right? The exception is going to be if the source does not have an author. If not, the very first piece of information you're going to have is going to be the title of the article or the book or whatever it is, right? And you would list that alphabetically as well. So for example, let's say we did not have this author here. Let's say we were starting with the title, which is called The Long Tail. We would alphabetize this by the title, but not under the. If the title starts with a, and, the, any of those little words like that, go on to the next important word in the title. So this would be under long, so it would go eagly, the long tail, and then Stalter, comma, sunny, right? So again, if that happens, that's how you would handle it. Notice that the entire thing should be double spaced. Again, I know it kind of seems like a waste of paper when you just have a few sources on here, but it should be double spaced just like the rest of your essay. Probably the thing that people mess up most often is a works cited page should have what's called a hanging indent. So notice that the first line of each entry should be all the way to the left. Whereas if it goes on to a second or third line, you want to use your tab key to indent it. And this is just so that when a reader looks at your works cited page, they can very easily find that word that they're looking for from your in-text citation. So if I'm looking for a word like Stalter, I see that in your in-text citation, I can very easily see where it is, right? So again, that's probably the thing I see people mess up most often. They just put everything all the way to the left, and then it's very hard to kind of distinguish where each source begins. So like I mentioned when I was talking about using that Cite tab, again, I'll go back to it just to show you here. Right here, when you click on Cite, and it automatically creates a citation for you. I think that's good to do, but you're going to have to make some changes. So what I did was I just cut and pasted exactly what I have here, and it does a lot of the work for me. What I would say is, notice that this is all highlighted now, showing that I cut and pasted it, whereas these others are not. If you're going to do that for your sources, I would do that for all of them so it doesn't look weird. Like right now, this one looks kind of odd, and the other ones are not highlighted. So if you're going to do it one way, do it for all of your sources. That's what I would say. But again, I made some changes here. Like in the original one, this is in all caps. It should not be in all caps when you do your works cited entry. Also notice that this is only single spaced. You want to change this to double spacing, right? So the point is, yes, use these tools that help you out, but you always have to double check it to make sure that it looks correct, right? Same thing if you decide to use a source like EasyBib, which some of you have probably heard of, right? It'll generate a source for you, but always double check it and compare it to make sure that, something's not capitalized that shouldn't be capitalized, or the spacing is correct, or it has the hanging indent, right? So again, these are just some things to think about when you do your works cited page for your report essay.